Hello, I would like to reintroduce a module to the Instruō range. This is a version 2 of the cèis A.D.S.R envelope generator, which is one of the original was one of the earlier modules that I designed. It was the first sort of all analog utility module in the Instruō range. A.D.S.Rs are quite a fundamental building block in many synthesis techniques. I mean, historically, there weren't many synths out there that didn't feature or don't feature some sort of A.D.S.R envelope. This is quite a fun update on the original. There are a few new features and new elements that I updated on the circuitry, which completely broke the circuitry, so I then had to fix other bits. But yeah, it's definitely become a more interesting module because of it. So fundamentally, it's a 4-stage attack, decay, sustain, release envelope generator. I've got it hooked up to the scope here, so you can see a combination of the main CV output, as well as some gate logic that's coming from it as well. So it's a analog envelope generator. There's CV inputs over each of the segment controls, attack, decay, sustain, release. There are gate outputs, so you can see you can extract logic from the various stages of it. There's a third state of its toggle switch now. So the previous version had gate mode and trigger mode, which were optimizing the control scheme to receive either a gate or a trigger. The trigger input mode would it forces the attack stage to complete. So that's remained unchanged, but in addition, there's now a hold mode, which locks the A.D.S.R into sustain, which can be quite nice for auditioning voices, where you can just hold it on your sustain position and then interact with your timbre shaping of the patch. Then, quite a few things going on under the hood. There's combined trigger output, that's remained the same. There's now a retrigger input. So this is something that the original cèis was missing, was the ability to retrigger from decay or sustain back to attack. Interestingly, I don't think it's anything that I felt was missing in the way that I typically patch on a modular, but it's definitely a missing characteristic for more traditional synthesis control. If you're using a keyboard that's generating gate, trigger, and volt per octave, then you need a way to be able to re-trigger the start of the envelope without having to actively play staccato. That was the main reason that I wanted to update the module, was to add this re-trigger capability, but then that completely broke my logic output for the gates at the top. So that part of the circuit needed completely redesigned, which was a nice fun challenge, and it's definitely become a better module because of it, where there's the ability to run CV through the A.D.S.R now and utilize it not as an envelope, but as a voltage controlled slew limiter. So it can be a CV processor, as well as other ways of processing external signals, which is pretty fun. So in this video, I'm going to go through a few patch examples. I'm going to start off by just building things up very traditionally, very nuts and bolts of subtractive synthesis, and show where an A.D.S.R really shines in that sort of traditional context. And then I'll just get weirder and weirder, and it'll build up to a demonstration of this patch in particular, which has quite a lot going on. It's going to be a long one, I think, but hope you enjoy. Cheers. So to demonstrate something as fundamental as an A.D.S.R envelope generator, I'm going to keep things very traditional. I'm going to build up a subtractive synthesis voice, which should be a pretty familiar configuration. This is a patch, or this is a setup that is seen across the board on so many different synths. It's very much my entry point to synthesis and sound design, and I think it's a very, very powerful and, more importantly, quite predictable synthesis method, where it's very logical. You can see the signal flow, and it perfectly frames the context of where A.D.S.Rs are extremely powerful. So subtractive synthesis, in a nutshell, it's a rich in harmonics, bright starting voice that you subtract elements from. So you filter it, so you're removing either high frequency content versus low frequency content, and subtracting amplitude. So it's ultimately it uses an oscillator in most instances. So in this case, I'm going to use the Kruin as a stereo sawtooth, super saw type voice. Oscillators are fundamentally quite dumb. They just generate a tone and that's all they do. So you need to be able to tell them to shut up and articulate between notes. So that's where subtractive comes in. So you're subtracting volume from it. So you can start from a subtracted silent point, play a note and open up the VCA and hear the voice. So subtractive synthesis can also be very neatly broken down into two parallel signal paths. So there's the audio signal path and then there's the control signal path. And these run parallel to each other. So let's start by building up the audio signal path first. We'll be able to hear that and then hear how we're going to approach controlling that with as a subtractive voice. So I'm going to start with the Kruin as my supersaw, and I'm going to filter that. So this is a stereo supersaw voice. I'm going to deviate slightly from my typical all-Instruō system, and I'm going to use the Procyon from Eon Electronics. So this is a new stereo filter. It's very Instruō adjacent. So this is designed by Noe, who's been on the Instruō design team with me for a number of years now. So this is his first solo release, and it's a very well thought out, very well designed filter that's heavily inspired from the MS-20. So it's very squelchy. It's very powerful. I'm going to be underutilizing it in many ways. Like there's a really good difficult video as well as a bunch of videos from Noe and the Glasgow Synth Guild on the filter. So it's available from the Glasgow Synth Guild itself. So yeah, here we go. I'm going to patch up my audio signal path, which is stereo sawtooth, and that's going to the stereo input of Procyon. Procyon does itself actually have a built-in stereo VCA, but I've got this configured to the pre-filter mode, so I quite like the sound you get with using that as a gain stage to drive the input signal into the filter. Gets very musical. So it also, I think for clarity, having the output of the filter go to a dedicated stereo VCA, I think that's clearer visually or conceptually for showing the nuts and bolts of this patch. So my stereo VCA is this expanded Karn up here. And that's it. That's our audio signal path. So we have sawtooth wave into filter, filter into VCA. So if I bring up my cutoff frequency and bring up my filter, my VCA, sorry, we have sound. So this is a quite swarmy supersaw voice. If I bring the depth down, that's consolidated it down to a more basic sawtooth wave, and then low pass filtering. So this is subtracting brightness or subtracting high frequency content by low pass filtering the source audio. You can hear it's not quite cutting it to silence. Like there's definitely some lower tone remaining there. So that's where VCA comes in to subtract global amplitude. So we have timbre from the filter and we have loudness or amplitude from the VCA. So this is a sound source. It's very basic, but serves as a very good starting point. Okay, so for this to be musical, we need to be able to control the pitch it's playing from. So for my main control scheme, I'm going to be using the dial, which is the new quantizer that we released quite recently. I've got this set up in MIDI to CV mode, so this is acting as host for USB MIDI keyboard, and that's giving me volp octave, gate and trigger simultaneously. So a very traditional keyboard control source. So this is reminiscent of early analog keyboards where it would all be, the keyboard itself would just be a big voltage divider or stage voltage divider. So this is a bit more elaborate with it being MIDI digitized and converted to analog voltages, but same end result. So we have volp per octave, which is going to come from the dial here, and it's going to the volp per octave of the keyboard. So middle C is 0 volts, so that's made no difference. We have music. But again, as I said, oscillators are pretty dumb. They just oscillate, that's all they do. So we need to be able to articulate and tell this when to shut up. So the way to do that is our VCA. So here, very crude way of controlling pitch and amplitude simultaneously, but not the most intuitive instrument. So we want to tie this control of individual notes to my keyboard. So I'm going to do that. To start with, I'm going to demonstrate and show this with the gate signal only. So I'm going to preempt the A.D.S.R use case, and let's see how that fits in context. So I'm going to come from my gate signal output. I'll run that through the scope just so we can see it. And to start, I'm just going to use that as a on-off binary state gate signal and patch that straight to my VCA. So now VCA closed, CV opened up. As soon as I play a note, I'm going to get a pitch information, which is going to volt per octave. And the gate is telling the, it's controlling the voice of when it's meant to play or not. So this is as simple as it gets. And there are a few limitations and flaws to this. Maybe more noticeable in lower registers. So this is further proof that oscillators are dumb. Like, it's just constantly going. It doesn't know or care when I strike a key and open up the VCA, which is further down the audio signal path. So it means that I could be keying a note on or off a zero crossing. So that ramp is going to be constantly ramping up. And anytime I play a note, I may or may not hit a zero crossing. So that's where there might be a click on the onset or release of my note. So let's solve that. So first step, I'm going to run my gate signal and patch that through. I'll use this cèis, I'll use this A.D.S.R. So configuration wise, I've got the shape knob fully clockwise. So that is my traditional sort of exponential and logarithmic curvature. And I've got the toggle switch in the middle for gate. So this is indicating that it's expecting a gate signal as its control source. I'll patch out of here into the scope as well, just so we can see that raw signal. And let's send that to my VC. Okay, so here we can see on the scope, this is showing very much the typical A.D.S.R shape you would see in a textbook of an envelope generator in synthesis. And what this is doing, the gate is controlling when the envelope fires. So 4 parameters, we've got attack, decay, sustain, release. Attack, decay, and release are all time parameters, and sustain is the odd one out. So sustain is essentially a non-temporal control. Like, it doesn't define a duration in time, it's defining an amplitude. So as soon as I strike a key, generate a gate, it's going to enter the attack phase. It's going to take however long I've defined on that attack parameter to rise to its peak. From the peak, it's then going to decay down to the defined sustain level. So these are all horizontal, a little bit below center position. So we see the timing is going through and holding on sustain as long as I'm holding a key. And then as soon as I release that, the gate goes low, and then we're into the release portion, which releases down to 0 volts. So instead of that basic gate signal just opening and closing my volume in a binary state, I've now got a bit of softness to the transients of the notes. So what I'm going to do is my go-to trick in this context, where I've got filter into VCA. I'm going to simplify the A.D.S.R for my VCA. I'm going to turn it into what's essentially a gate follower. So I've got no attack, no decay, no release, and full sustain. So it means that attack is its shortest possible duration, decay is its shortest possible duration, so it's going to skip over them as quickly as possible and then hold on sustain. So it means that my gate signal, which is shown in red on the scope, is directly following my source gate signal. But depending on the frame rate of the camera, we might be able to see there's a little blip of it hitting the attack segment and the release segment on the release. And this is because there's a minimum duration in the circuitry. So visually on the scope, it's not particularly clear, but there's definitely a blip in these LEDs. and it's definitely not got as clicky or prominently clicky a sound as if I was going straight in. Yeah, it's a bit rough around the edges. It's also a bit quieter because this is 5-volt gate versus the 10-volt gate, or 10-volt range of the sustain, so it's converting it to a 10-volt amplitude gate. I could bring that down. You can hear it's getting more clicky the shorter I bring it down, because it's the rate of attack and decay, attack and release is shorter because it's got less of an amplitude to jump to. So keep it mid-range here. And what I'm going to do is bring up my attack and release slightly, so I'm manually softening. Actually, I will need to have sustain all the way up, otherwise the decay is going to apply the shaping. So this is what I like to do. I like to have a little bit of release on there, and that just adds a bit of a tail to each note. And I think as a starting point for synthesizing something that sounds musical, imagine you're standing beside a trumpet player and they play a note. Unless you're both in an anechoic chamber, you're going to hear some amount of release to that. So the resonance of the instrument itself, the reverberation of the room, there'll always be a tail on it. So adding in that release, it just naturalizes the sound a little bit. Keeps it from sounding a bit too dry. Cool. Okay, so that is step one of our control signal path. We have gate from our keyboard source in parallel to volt per octave. Volt per octave is giving the pitch information. And the gate signal, which is being followed by the envelope to soften it and just curate the attack in the tail slightly. It's giving us our articulation between notes. So now we want to control the timbre. Which I could do manually, of course. But if I want to remote control that or automate that, I'm going to use a second A.D.S.R. So what I'll do, I'll patch this through another channel of the scope so we can see it, and I will need to split my gate off so that the gate's going to control both together. Here we go. And output of my envelope to my filter. So it's going into the FM input, which is an attenuverter that sums with the main cutoff. Spread this out to stereo again. Make it phase a little bit. Yeah, that sounds good. So now we can see everything happening in parallel. We can see the gate over the VCA in red. We can see the A.D.S.R in yellow, which is that classic traditional attack, decay, sustain, release shape. And that's controlling my cutoff frequency. And we've got the source gate signal in green, which is coming from my keyboard. So this is the fundamental patch, and this is what's in so many different synths. So what really boils down to, the sound source is basic. It's just a sawtooth wave or a square wave. The filter is just controlling brightness, sort of prominence, presence of the sound, and the VCA is just giving us silence between notes. So it means that all the character of subtractive synthesis comes from our envelope shaping. So if I want something more percussive, let's take attack down. Let's give ourselves a little bit more decay. I'll bring my sustain down lower, so it's going to sort of pluck down to a lower sustained amplitude, and I'll keep release somewhere in the middle. trick here I'll throw in, which is being able to get two different levels of note duration. So what I've done here, I've increased my release tail on my VCA, so the VCA is going to be held open for longer after each note. I've got sustain down quite low, so it's almost closing the filter. I've got my decay quite quick, so it means when I press a gate, press a key, hold a gate, it's going to complete that decay duration until it lands on sustain. But if I essentially produce a trigger, if I just play a really staccato short note, then it's skipping through decay, it's not holding long enough for the decay to hit the sustain, so whatever amplitude it's at, it's then immediately jumping to the release tail. So it means I've got a longer so it's almost like having two levels of accent over the note. This trick comes in quite useful in percussive patches, so I'll build up a kick voice at some point in this video. So that's quite a useful mechanic. We're not quite finished with the base construction of the patch yet, because there's one fundamental flaw here. So far it's behaving okay. It's giving me the behavior I would expect. So I have it's quite a percussive note sound because I've got no attack and just a little bit of decay. But to get that articulation between notes, as you'll see on the keyboard, I'm having to play quite staccato. And that's because I need to force the gate to release in between each note, so that it is able to reset the envelopes so that I get that short attack into the decay stage every time. If I play legato, I completely lose that articulation because the gate, as you'll see on the scope, it stays high because it doesn't differentiate between notes. It's like as long as any notes are held high, that gate will be high, which will mean the A.D.S.Rs will hold in their sustain position. So there's actually a parallel signal to the gate signal in a traditional keyboard synth like this, which is RETRIG or trigger. So this is from this extra output here on the dial, which is producing a trigger signal, which is just a very short gate of like 5 seconds, 5 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, thereabouts. I'll patch that through the blue channel. So now you can see that initial note when I play, and as I play and hold, you can see there's more trigger signals occurring during the duration of the gate. So if I use that as a retrigger control, send that to both A.D.S.Rs, to the retrigger input. It means I can play more naturally. And I think this is an element that's quite important to original design of the A.D.S.R, of early subtractive synths, is the first commercialized synthesizer that had a black and white keyboard that was given to musicians. They'll have been expecting an instrument to behave a certain way, like coming from piano or a clavichord or a Rhodes, something like that. Then there's an expectation of what this instrument's going to do. I guess the biggest hurdle will have been monophony, like where, how do you play chords? So that's that was quite a quick limitation, I imagine. But then I think it's quite important that the player not need to adapt their playing style too dramatically to get what they want out of the instrument. So that's where this gate and trigger mechanic is quite important in subtractive synthesis. So you might notice the previous iteration of the cèis, the cèis V1, it didn't have the retrigger input. So that was a limitation in my expertise at the time, where I was studying different methods of analog CMOS-controlled logic A.D.S.R circuits. And all the references I was using, they didn't have the trigger capability. In practice, I didn't feel like I missed it, because it's only really in this really traditional context of a keyboard controlling a subtractive synth that you need both that gate and trigger signal. But I don't really consider myself much of a keyboard player, so it's not my go-to instrument when I'm playing with a synth. A lot of times I'm just building a generative patch, or I'm doing something with other methods of control. So a lot of times I didn't miss that retrigger, but the cèis V2 has it in, so it means that it's a bit more fleshed out. It's got this this traditional capability. So cool. I'm going to expand this patch a little bit more just to show where I would like push a subtractive voice, just to get a little bit more fullness to the voice. So one thing that's a bit of a quirk with the crewing, we can hear as I play between registers. So this is my middle C, which is 0 volts. I've set a certain amount of phasing of chorusing from the supersaw element here. But as I go up in register, it becomes more static, and that's because it's basically a linear and exponential contrast, where I'm going up over a linear range of pitch, which is different from the exponential range of frequency. Where if I go up an octave, that's a linear movement, but it's a doubling in frequency. So it means that the deviation of the supersaw spread, going from a lower register where it sounds fuller, there's more phasing, there's more contrast. As I go to a higher pitch, I'm going to double and double and double if I'm going up in octaves. So it means that the actual deviation from that center frequency is a lower number of hertz. So there's less drama to the movement. So what I'm going to do is simulate an element of key tracking, where I'll take my volt per octave signal, I'm going to patch that into my modulation CV input over rate. So it means 0 volts, that has me defining my certain amount of rate and depth. Let's go up a couple of octaves and bring up my modulation depth. So that's going to be increasing the rate of phasing. Much better. And the last little touch, this is very dry, so even with a bit of a release tail just to keep it natural, but I'm going to branch out from my VCA and send this to this looper that you'll see is just constantly recording onto itself. So this is acting as a stereo, or like two parallel delays. I'll mix that back in to the Karn. Much better. Let's get more plucky. Cool, so that's A.D.S.R's in a slightly lengthy nutshell, but I felt it was important to kind of showcase the context of subtractive synthesis and where an A.D.S.R traditionally fits. So this is kind of underutilizing the cèis v2 in itself, because it's got a lot of CV inputs, a lot of additional gate outputs, trigger, combined trigger output. It's got the linear shape capability, and some other stuff. So I'm going to dig into some less traditional patches next. I've got 3 cèises in this system, and I'm going to try and use all 3 in this next patch. I think that should be quite easily done. I found a notebook from a few years ago, and this is a transcription of a patch that I did in a workshop at Schneidersladen, where an element of the patch I was using a couple of cèises to control some rhythmic elements. So I'm going to try and recreate that while using a couple of cèises for generating percussion voices themselves. So first voice, I'm going to build a kick using a resonant filter. So that's the 1047 here. And I'm going to use that, not self-oscillating, not quite, but controlled from a clock. So let me patch it. I'm going to patch it through a tan H just to give myself a little bit of saturation. So to hear what that sounds like, the 1047 won't self-oscillate unless I engage the feedback switch here. Yeah, that's kicked it in, and this is my tan H saturation level. And I'm going to ping that from a trigger signal. So my clock signal, I'm going to use this octone here. So this is cycling through just 3 steps. I'll use this first gate output. So this is actually a gate signal. So this is a first demonstration of use of the cèis, and that is to convert a gate to a trigger. So here we have this gate signal. I'm going to control this cèis with it, and I'm going to derive a trigger from this attack output. So this it's going to be dependent upon the speed of my oscilloscope. Yeah, so there's a sample rate limitation there. It's sometimes not picking them up. But yeah, we're seeing occasional triggers matching gates. So I'm going to use that as my clock source. There we go. Slow this down a bit. So this is a ping input. You can hear the decay time is tied to the resonance amount. So I find a tone that I quite like as a fundamental. Play with saturation level a little bit. Bring that down, boost that here. Okay, so this is a static tone, so this is more like an 808 type kick drum voice. So 808's a Bridge T network resonant filter, but it's a static tone, so you ping it and it just rings out with this particular decay. What I could do, I can patch this through. Let's go to the red channel. Here we go. So let's visualize it on the scope at the same time. So that's my raw kick impulse. And I'm going to further affect this by using the envelope from this cèis to pitch down the transient very quickly. So let's view that on the scope as well. There we go. So we should see that in yellow. And I'll be able to play about with a combination of decay time and release time. So because this is receiving a gate from here, the gate duration is dependent upon how long it's on that step. So we can see the gate is in green. So it means that I've got the duration of that green gate to define my decay time. So you see, if I bring my decay time up longer than the duration of the gate is immediately cutting it off. I could fill in that edge with my release and create this sort of stranger function. But if I want to get something that's more of a quick impulse, then I can probably keep that within the gate duration. But it depends on if it is a trigger source you're using or a gate source, whether you'd want to use the decay time or the release time for this sort of envelope shaping. So here we go from envelope source, and I'm going to patch that to the FM input of my 1047. There we go. So timbre of the kick, this is a variable between the decay time, the shorter the impulse of that transient pitch drop, and of course the depth of FM will determine how high in frequency it's going to throw the resonant tone up. That sounds in a good place. Cool. So what I'm going to do in addition to this, I'm going to double that clock just to add a little bit more variation. And I'm going to clock this tie. And that's going to align and match that. It's also simultaneously clocking an analog sample and hold, or I could even use that just as my direct signal. So that is clock input. So I've now got sample and hold from here, and I'm going to use that just as a random voltage over my decay time. I might need to attenuate this slightly. Yeah, it's a little bit aggressive, so I'm going to switch to using my random output, because this one I can attenuate. It's subtle, but it's adding a little bit of random CV to my decay time with the CV input. So that's kind of one of the tricks of the cèis, is having voltage control input over each of the envelope segments. So it just makes it a little bit more dynamic, just a bit more deviation. Cool. Okay, so that's percussion voice number one. We've got a kick. I'm going to use a faster clock from the clock output of the octone. So it's set to loop in 3 steps. I'm going to use this as a faster clock source to clock this cèis here, and this is going to be more of a snare hi-hat type tone. So to get that, I'll use the white noise source from this tie, and I'm going to high pass filter that through the Procyon. Let's come out of here, center the panning. So we're getting a little bit of saturation, almost ducking, because the Karn's got its limiter engaged, so that's going to, especially for percussion voices, it adds a nice bit of control to things. Get a static tone I like, and then I've got the VCA set to post filter, so it means I can use this as my amplitude control for enveloping this percussion voice. So let's come out of the envelope output from my cèis, patch that into the VCA input. I'm going to extend my pattern up a bit. Let's go 7-step, just make it slightly irregular. And this is just same trick. I'm just using this trigger signal, and I'm playing with the decay time and the release times to vary the timbre of this impulse. I should note that both this and my kick envelope, I've kept them fully clockwise for the shape control, so that's in very traditional sort of exponential shaping, which sounds more natural. We might definitely sounds a bit more synthetic on the kick voice when it's fully linear like that. Just the speed of that exponential drop, it's more akin to natural sound and how sound behaves naturally. There we go. So we can hear I'm getting variation in timbre of my hi-hat sound depending on where my decay signal is, my decay duration is. So let's control that. Because I'm controlling this entirely from a sequencer, I can sequence that. Let's set some random notes and patch my CV input to Decay. Sounding cool. Okay, fill this out a bit. I'm just going to add a manually played voice. I'll just come from volt per octave from this dial I used earlier on. So that's just MIDI to CV. I'm going to use the toner here just as a different voice from before. Use a wavefolder output. Filter that just for a bit of control. Let's hear that sounds direct. Too static, so let's add some modulation. Just add a bit of an LFO into the wavefold depth. Actually, I'll get this to sound a bit richer if I run it through a constant delay. Okay, fills out a little bit more. Okay, let's improve this rhythmically. So far I've used two cèis, each one just as an envelope, as an impulse decay envelope over percussion voices. These could as easily be percussion voice modules, so it could be a kick module or snare module. This is just tricks of synthesizing with more basic building blocks. So let's use this last cèis in a more atypical way. So I'm going to use my clock source and I'm going to patch that into here. And what we'll see if I bring my sustain up slightly, we're getting a really rapid run through all segments following the clock. So shortest attack, shortest decay, a little bit of sustain, and that's forcing a little bit of amplitude for the release tail. I'm going to use the gate trigger out from my released section, and I'm going to use that to reclock my hi-hat sound. So this is one of the tricks with the cèis, using the trigger input mode. So this will force the attack duration to complete, which means I've got this duration of incoming clock that I can delay by the duration of my attack. Means I can dial in a certain amount of irregularity, so I may be able to get some control of sequencing this. Because my sequence is a constant, I can use the CV output from it to control my attack time. Go. I'll just double my output. I'll show the configuration of this sequencer at the moment. Here we go. clock signal that's going here, and then I've multed the CV output to go to my attack as well. So now the same sequence that's affecting my decay time of my hi-hat sound is also used to add a trigger delay element to that same clock signal. Let's get this running faster. This is using just the gate output of the release stage. There's actually a combined trigger output on the cèis as well, which takes any gate signal from any of these and converts them to triggers and combines them from this single output. So this is where we can get much more interesting stochastic timing. Ratchets, bursts, flams, yeah. A range of different capabilities. Then we remove the CV, so it's more of a constant. There we go. So just delaying the timing, it's added a bit of a swing element. So what I can do even is randomize my sequence. This can come from any clock source really, so if you've got some sort of sequencer that you typically use for rhythmic elements, adding in a cèis, which isn't being used as a typical A.D.S.R, but you're able to use it as a burst generator, trigger delay. In this case is now frequency multiplying. CV controlled trigger delay and rhythmic upscaler, I guess. Next, I'm going to build a patch which is going to utilize cèis v2 as a variable slope slew generator, slew limiter. And I'm going to demonstrate this through a sequence, which I'll quantize through the dial and control a basic subtractive voice. So the voice itself, let's go with the toner through the ARA. I'm going to use a wavefolder voice just to keep things a bit more interesting. So this will go to my output. That's cool. And I'm going to envelope the filter from this cèis. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to have my sequence controlling the note curation of this voice. So I'm going to use the octone pair down here as my main sequencer, and that's going to go into the dial as a quantizer. So the dial will just give me a bit extra capability in terms of note selection on the fly if I need. I might also change this to be in MIDI to CV for part of this example as well. So let's view the sequence on the scope first. So that's showing in green, and it's this sequence that I'm going to run through a cèis to utilize it as a slow limiter. So the way to configure this is to use the hold position, which is going to lock the function generator into its sustain portion. So it's now locked in sustain, and this fader acts as a unipolar positive 0 to 10 volt DC offset. But the CV input itself can take full bipolar signals, and that will act as a voltage follower. The trick being that if I have variable stepped amplitudes, the attack and decay portions of the cèis now act as rising and falling slew amount. So if I bring them up, we'll see that we're starting to get some more activity changing between the static sustain position and rising and falling slew. So it's actually doing a couple of things at once. We're getting the slew limiting, but we're also getting some degree of logic extraction from it based on the direction that the slew's moving. So now we're seeing the blue trace on the scope layered on top of the green. The blue is my slewed, the green is the original. So as I bring up my decay amount, we can see that's adding falling slew. Bring up attack, that's applying rising slew. So I've got independence of a rise and fall, as well as CV control over those rise and fall amounts, which is pretty cool. So let's put this into the voice, send that to volt per octave. Let's listen to some slew first. So that's no slew, rise only, fall only. Okay, let's get this a bit more dynamic. I'm actually going to mult my volt per octave source and send that to the wavefold depth, almost like key tracking. Just get a little bit of different timbre per note. And of course I need to start controlling the filter from my envelope. So I can use the clock from my dial, so that's going to be giving me a trigger pulse per note. Cool. So here's the next trick that I've been playing with. So there's an extra benefit of going via the dial. The dial's got its own slew limiting that can be applied. I'm going to add a base amount of that because what it's going to do, it's going to soften the edges of my original sequence. So that's on the green trace, and that's going to give me enough smoothing that it's giving me a little bit more articulation and control over the logic extraction states. So it means that the slew's being applied, it's minimal enough that it's not really affecting the parameter as much as if I bring up the cèis applied slew. But it's cleaning things up for the logic extraction. So here, if I patch out of my decay output, this is only going to fire a trigger or a gate as long as it's in that falling slew state. So I can get that a couple of different ways. One, I can bring up my slew amount, so it means that it's going to seek out more or shallower falling amplitude control voltage signals. Or I can curate this melodically, where I can dial in an interval amount, so only descending intervals over a certain depth, I guess, will actually trigger this logic extraction. So let's use this logic to trigger something. So we'll have an accent hit. I'm going to do that with this envelope, and I'm just going to open up this filter with a static tone from the crewing. So give me like a single note stab in conjunction with the sequence. So now, if I bring up my decay time, there's a certain threshold I can set it to that it's going to be pulling out these hits on every descending note. If I bring that down further, let's do it melodically. So I'll bring up this note. There we go. So when it goes from this higher note down to my root note, my tonic, it's going to be extracting that as an event. What I'll do, I'll pause the sequence just now, or I'll just unpatch that slightly. I'm going to change the dial over to being MIDI to CV, and this way there we go. So that's going up to minor third and an octave. That interval descending is enough to cross the threshold to extract a descending slew logic gate. So you can use this as a extractor from melodic information that's either played in live or from a sequence or random voltage. It's quite a fun way of just adding a bit more control over a patch, where you might have a sequence going, patch it through the cèis, and then you've got an extra bit of clocking information that you can pull out on the fly to affect elements of the patch. So the way I'm doing it here, of course, is I'm creating this extra note, this pedal tone stab. So let's go back to my sequence. So here I can just play about with different notes through the sequence and derive additional stabs. Okay, let's build this out a little bit more, just get it a little bit more musical. The stabs, I'm going to split one side, send that into the looper. Okay, let's get rid of that note. So I'm going to pull out ascending note logic, clock a sample and hold from that, and then send that random voltage to my delay time. There we go. It's just affecting the patch a little bit more. I'll do something parallel. So I'll take my master clock, using this tie anyway, so I'll just clock that and add in a clocked percussive voice. So I'll just ping this 1047, keep it quite a high frequency, add that into the mix. So I can remove the reactive stabs by just bringing my melody down to being within a certain register, and it's only when I throw a note up high enough it's going to extract that. Logic extraction and slew limiting from an A.D.S.R envelope generator. So here's a slightly unusual use case of the cèis 2. It's not dissimilar from the example that I did showing slew limiting over a CV signal, over a sequence or volt per octave signal. But I'm going to be doing this in the audio domain. So I'm going to use the cèis, which is essentially a voltage-controlled integrator circuit. I'm going to use it as a wave shaper, as a signal processor. So I'm going to do that over, I'll start with the square wave from this toner as an audio signal that I'm going to process. Let's view that on the scope first. So we've got our original, and then I'm going to patch out of that, and I'm going to run this through a cèis. Let's use this one here, and I'm going to configure this the same way I would do slew limiting, where I hold on sustain with the hold position of the switch, and my sustain CV input becomes my signal input. So I can now patch my output to another channel of the scope. There we go, and it's almost bang on a frequency that was giving me integration to shape the square wave to a triangle. Now let's hear how that sounds. I'll patch my output through a 1047 filter just so I can roll off the high end if we need, just because it's going to be a bit more static tones. Here we go. That sounds like a triangle wave. So what's happening here is I'm taking this square wave and I'm running it through and using the attack and decay times as my rise and fall slew rates to shape the audio signal. So we can see as I increase my attack duration, it's going to take longer for that ramp to hit its peak, but the oscillation frequency is faster than that duration. So that's why we're getting, truncation of the amplitude. So there's a trick here. The cèis was very much designed and curated for A.D.S.R envelope context, so it didn't make sense for me to have the lower ranges of the faders going down to low millisecond durations, because it was then going to be a bit less practical for use as an envelope. So if I take a DC bias signal that I can send negative voltage to, patch that to my CV inputs of both attack and decay, you can see I can now shorten my attack and decay times to fit within the frequency of the square wave better, which has given me a little bit more control over my wave shaping capabilities. Or I can control these both at the same time, so I can go from, we're getting into some weird resonance stuff. I think that's just self-oscillations within the circuitry itself, so that's something else I'll explore at some point in the future, I think. Some form of resonance. So if I increase my slew times, I'm able to go from almost the source square wave down to a triangle wave, so dynamic wave shaping. I'm going to send a sequence to this just so we've got something a bit more melodic. CV out to volt proctive in. So this is using the main CV output of this cèis, but because this has got some logic extraction capabilities, I can kind of use it as a comparator as well. So what I'll do, I'll change to triangle wave. So I'm kind of further slewing my triangle wave, but I'm able to use extraction of the rise and fall slew rates, so the attack and decay segments, and those are going to give me, they'll be unipolar positive, but they're square wave signals, essentially, or pulse signals. So I'll bring down my filter cutoff just so it's softened a bit, and let's patch out from one of them. Let's go with decay. So square wave with variable pulse width now. So I can derive a PWM pulse signal from any waveform really via the cèis, so using the logic extraction. Because it's CV controllable, that could come from an LFO, for instance. It's come from the oct. Of chorusing added in. Getting into that resonant spot again. So yeah, so CV controlled PWM. That's more like it. So that's me affecting just the decay time, keeping the attack consistent. So there's a little bit more timbre that can be derived from any existing waveform. So there's another quirk to this. Let's take the CV out just now. I'll go back to multing, sending my negative CV to both. Let's patch out of my main output. Let's go to, let's try with the sawtooth wave actually. I think it's going to be better with the square wave because the integrator is going to slew both ascending and descending to ramps. But yeah, as you can see here, we're going from the, close to the original square wave and bringing it down to triangle and eventually flattening out to just silent DC or close to silent DC. So this is kind of akin to filtering. So what I can do here is take the clock from my sequence, use another cèis here, just get a nice exponential decay or release envelope, and let's patch that to my CV. My filter static, this filtering sound, this enveloped low-pass filter sound is my envelope generator. So I'm enveloping another envelope to use that as a low-pass filter. So yeah, if you run out of filters in a system, in a patch, and you've got an A.D.S.R left over, A.D.S.R can kind of behave like a filter, which is kind of weird. So this patch got a little bit dense, but it's not too far stretched from the various patches that I've built up through this video. So I thought I'd end on something that was combining a lot of factors. So ultimately this is a basic subtractive voice. I've got sawtooth wave from the croon here, that's going into a filter, into a VCA. And then I've got two ADSRs again, one controlling the filter, one controlling the VCA. So very, very traditional signal flow for the bass synth voice. What I wanted to demonstrate was use of the cèis in particular, branching out logic states and control from the gate outputs, as well as some use of the CV inputs, which is controlling deeper elements of the patch in parallel to the basic voice. So it's kind of micro control and macro control in parallel over something that will hopefully be a very performable instrument. So yeah, quite a lot going on, but what I'll do, I'll clear this. And you can see I can control it entirely from this keyboard here. So it's giving me volt per octave, gate and trigger. The gate and trigger is controlling this A.D.S.R. The gate only is controlling this one. So I've then got various states of logic coming out and interfacing with the looper. So this is my compositional element, where if I key a note, I've got a trigger from the attack stage of this A.D.S.R. that's going to start capturing on the looper. I've got the release gate output of the second cèis. That's going to the erase control. So I'm able to start capturing, control overdub state, and also clearing entirely from the keyboard. I don't necessarily need to interface with the modular synth itself. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to strike a key. As long as I hold that, that's going to be recording in my first foundation loop. And loop. So you can hear as I released, I got a different ping of the delay. So there's a parallel deck that's acting as a feedback delay. It's being modulated by a sample and hold. The sample and hold is being clocked from the combined trigger output of this first cèis. So every time I key a note, I'll have a cascade of triggers from attack, decay, sustain, release stages, and that's going to be clocking sample and hold, giving new random voltage to the delay. So it means when I key a new note, I'm going to get a different delay time, which is going to whip and is going to add a little bit of movement to the sound. So here we go. I'll dub in a harmony. So while I held that note, it seemed to land on a slow speed just through chance of random voltage on the delay. But then as I released it again, that was clocking it from the release logic state. So as long as I hold a gate here, you can hear things are starting to fade out, and that's because I've got the looper set up to overdub and just slowly diminish the previous content. Having to keep an eye on the record button on this primary deck of the looper. So when it's looping and it's white, this is constant playback, and it means that when I leave it and I don't interact with the keyboard, it's going to continually loop this endlessly with no modulation, no effects happening until I interact with the keyboard. If I want to clear things, there's a trick I found just down to how I've got the logic cascaded. If I hold a note, if I play legato and play another note while keeping the first one held, the note came through, but it also sent an additional trigger from the attack stage to the record control, so that's taken recording off. It means that now if I release the note, I'm going to get a trigger signal from my release tail, and that's going to tell the looper to erase completely. So it's a way that I can clear things on the fly. Clear the deck, and then I can start a new loop. So, a little bit elaborate, but I thought this would be quite a nice way to tie things together and show a wide range of use cases of the A.D.S.R, controlling not just a traditional subtractive voice, but also deeper elements of the patch. I guess one little thing I didn't mention, I've got CV input from the same sample and hold that's controlling my delay time is controlling the attack time of my filter's A.D.S.R. So it means that there's a random chance of duration of a softer attack per node. Yeah, hope you enjoy. This is the cèis V2. Quite a capable fundamental module, which gives you A.D.S.R plus logic plus slew. Yeah, it's a fun one.